This is Sanjay Sharma, and you are tuned to our very special conversation program called Sir, Let Me Tell You, where we invite students who are about to graduate or have recently graduated to impart and reflect on what they have learned and how they plan to apply in their lives, both personal as well as professional. This initiative stems from a startling realization. During a recent discussion with the students, I was pleasantly surprised to notice that they accumulated way more knowledge than I remember sharing during the class discussions. It was a real treat listening to them with their level of sophistication in articulating ideas, concepts, and theories. Frankly speaking, I felt so privileged witnessing their transformation as their teacher, mentor, or coach, and could not help but recall the Hindi verse. हर सुमन का सुरभि से यह अनलिखा अनुबंध पवन को सौंपे बिना यदि मैं झरूं सौगंध, meaning there is this unwritten contract between the flower and fragrance that the flower would not perish until it facilitates a smooth assimilation of fragrance with the wind so that it could achieve its purpose of existence or what it was meant to. For a teacher, nothing could be more delightful and rewarding than seeing motivated and diligent students come up with flying colors and excel in their fields of interest. All they need is a mentor who could assist them in figuring out a sense of direction and purpose of learning for their flourishing. This initiative is an effort to offer a platform where they can showcase their caliber and competence with confidence. Having taught in different parts of the world in different departments, I would be inviting students from political philosophy to international relations, Korean studies to Asian business management, legal studies to languages, and so on. If this is what resonates with you and you feel motivated to join us as guest students, let me hear from you. I hope you would love the program. Let's get started. So, welcome to our next episode of Let Me Tell You, Sir. I'm glad today our guest student is Ujjwal Deshmukh. He's going to be second year student of honors degree in political science, and he's interested not just in political science but mainly philosophy, international relations, technology, computers, gaming. He's got a wide choices, and when you ask questions or discuss in the class, you could be sure that he would not only give you the answers of the questions but also lots of bonus points. So it's always a pleasure talking to him and listening to him. So I'm very glad that he's joining us today. So welcome to the show, Ujjwal.
Thank you, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, as I said that you keep reading lots of things. So what is that you've been into these days, and what is that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yes, so today I would like to talk about AI ethics, ethics of artificial intelligence, and it is a really new topic in which sort of combines different things from philosophy and in the space of technology, which are not really synonymous with each other if you think about it. So that's what I've been reading on these days.
From a layman's perspective, could you give it some idea, like what exactly we mean when you say ethics and morality are the same things, and how do you connect with the artificial intelligence?
In the ethics, we mainly study about human actions, how they are good or bad, what are our obligations, how they are good or bad, what are our values, virtues, whether they are good or bad, and concerned about morality. What is morality is basically what is good or bad. And ethics is also known as moral philosophy. So it is kind of used interchangeably today, but in the past, the definitions were varied about those things. But today they are kind of the same. When we talk about ethics in artificial intelligence, we are mainly concerned with what will be the ethical questions and what are the ethics of artificial intelligence and all those sort of things. So if we talk about artificial intelligence, we have to talk about, like, for example, right now Google assistants and those type of artificial intelligence. And in future, when there will be more and more advanced artificial intelligence, they will pose certain ethical questions towards humanity. And how are we going to combat those questions? And that is the sort of thing that artificial intelligence ethics deals with.
I see. I was somewhere reading about this deep fake thing, right? So people can copy not just your face but your voice, and then can produce content on that basis. It's kind of like scary. So, tell me, what exactly is this artificial intelligence doing to our lives, and what are those major salient features that you would say that people should be aware about?
So first of all, we think that artificial intelligence is something that only belongs in laboratories or in the offices of big corporations and in their labs where they do research on it. But the fact is not true today. AI in fact powers everything that we interact with today. Everything behind the internet is powered by AI. To give you an example, the AI that powers Google actually gives results based on their search and search optimization that is done entirely by artificial intelligence. When you watch a video on YouTube, that video suggested to you by the algorithms of the YouTube, and that is also powered by artificial intelligence. And when you go to Amazon, you search something, the same thing happens. Another thing is that AI is also being used by governments and financial institutions to basically take big amounts of data and match the patterns there and make policies on them. So it is kind of like multidisciplinary approach, and it is being influencing every facets of our life today.
How come this technology suddenly became so important, so critical in our lifestyle? Is it because that it made things easier, or it just we have entered in a very different lifestyle?
Yes, it has made things more and more convenient for us, and artificial intelligence has been here for a long time. Like since the invention of computers, there has been a notion of artificial intelligence. As human beings, we are driven by curiosity. So we have always been curious by what is going to happen next, how to progress in the society. Like from the moment the first person invented fire, we have progressed towards whatever we wanted to be curious about, from the age of fire to the scientific civilization that is we are today. So in a way, it is also driven by curiosity. Another thing is that today the research in AI is is being led by big corporations around the world, and those corporations are basically untouchable today. So the corporation, namely Amazon, Google, Tencent in China, Beidou, Alibaba, and many others, though even not even the most influential governments can touch them. So, and another thing is that the when you think about AI, these corporations are, their motive is to earn financial profits, and AI is the best way to basically replace humans in a way that AI can do a lot of things efficiency wise more better than humans. We humans are not really efficient in doing certain tasks, and that's where the AI is utilized by these corporations. And it hasn't been that AI has made our lives easier. Like I told you about Google, YouTube algorithms and whatnot. They have also improved our lives drastically, but there is always a looming danger that it will result in something that is going to basically make us go extinct. And the danger is more prominent than, let's say, nuclear or wars, or let's say another things in the history. Is because what AI is a simple algorithm. Anybody can program it. And another thing is that the barrier of entry is really low in AI. For a simple person from anywhere in the world could program an AI that could go into any big company server and hijack it and hack it and do whatever it with it. That is not the case with, like, say, nuclear weapons. So for nuclear weapons, you need uranium, and nobody except the governments or top nations around get uranium from anywhere. So the barrier of entry is less, and that's why the risks are high. And the way AI functions is that it is able to learn the way neural network functions. So the learn it can also learn, and that is another thing that we, in a way, kind of scary about it.
There is some question coming up like, should we give a moral agency to AI? What do we mean by that when we say so?
The term moral agency means that as humans we are moral agent. That means that we are able to make decisions based on what is right or wrong. And this question has come up with AI is because should AI be the moral agent? That means, so I'd like to explain this work via an example. So the example would be self-driving cars. And now I'd like to bring you to the trolley problem. So in trolley problem, what we give people choices, and based on those choices, people have to decide what is right and what is wrong. Such as on the track there is one person, and on another track there is a cow. Who do you kill? So same thing is with self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are really only in testing phase, but someday it is going to happen, and it is very near in next 5 to 10 years that they have to make those decisions, such as when as humans we are behind the driving seat of the car. When the car is going to crash, we have the option that whether you crash into the pedestrian, or whether you crash into the wall, or whether you crash into an old man, or whether you crash into the child. So this is like the practical, in a way, approach to the trolley problem, that we have to make the decision in the car when the car is going to crash. And same problem the AI has will have to make, whether whether it should protect the life of the passenger in the car, or of the pedestrian, whether a child or an old man. And that is why this question of moral agency is coming up, whether we should give this option of whether we should give moral agency to AI. So some people say that no, we should not. What we should do is basically program those choices into the AI, what to choose and what to not choose in a way. That means that AI will be programmed and it will not be given self moral agency. Another thing is that some people say that no, because AI does not get influenced by the human emotion, it is more rational. So we should give moral agency to the AI. But there is an argument that you need to give moral agency, some kind of moral agency to the self-driving cars or AI in them, because someday or the another they have to make the decision whether to save one life at the cost of another. Another thing in this area comes up is that the concept of moral patiency. So what is moral patiency is that moral patients are the recipients of the actions of what is good or bad. So in a way they are recipients of the action of moral agents. And some concerns are coming up that basically with AI growing up exponentially in intelligence, it is going to make us humans moral agents. What does it mean is that we will lose the capacity to become moral agents. That means we are going to give more and more prominence to what AI is thinking instead of what we feel. And that is also a really high concern of thing, because if we human become moral agents, moral patients, then AI will have to carry out the task of being a moral agent. That means you are basically giving AI the most prominent thing, that the most basic thing that is about human is that is our feeling, gut feeling, what is moral. We are moral creatures, but once AI becomes that, what happens? That is a scary thought too.
So, what are the main applications that you can think of where these the ethical concerns are quite big, or rather bigger than people can just think of?
Right now the way most of the AI's work is by machine learning, and for machine learning you need massive amounts of data. Collection of data comes with a concern of privacy. So let me give you an example. So when you buy a smartphone, and let's say an Android smartphone, so you first log into it, you log in via Google ID. So by just buying a smartphone, logging into that smartphone by your Google account, here is how much information you give to Google. First, your address. Second thing, what you look like via Google Photos, via Google Drive. What are your important documents which you upload to Google Drive? What is your phone number? What is your friend's phone number? What are your family's phone numbers, and many others? Because most people save their phones in their phone numbers in their Google account. Another thing is, what do you sound like? Because Google Assistant is always turned on. If you say hey, the code word, it will respond to you. So what you sound like. And it also tracks where you move by Google Maps. So let's say you go to point A to point B, it knows the exact time you were there, how much time you were there, and how. And by that thing it can also get various kinds of information about you, like what is your income based on where you live, what type of locality you live, what is your race, what is your gender, and that is just the data Google collects when you log into your phone via Google account. And if we talk about concerns about data collection, is that most of the time the data collection that happens, we are unknown to it, because most of the time nobody reads the terms and conditions given by these companies, and nobody can read it even, because they are so long and filled with such legal jargons that it is impossible for an average person to read them. And that's where the concern of privacy comes up, because if these apps, these websites, these massive companies are always tracking you, what becomes of you? And what about people who cannot give consent, such as minors? What about them? And what about people who are of old age, who necessarily don't know the meaning of those things? And that is where the concerns of application of AI comes up.
What is it, how to say, intrusion as far as these fake news kind of things are concerned?
When you think about fake news, so in the old era, what it was basically, it was some tabloid newspapers spreading propaganda basically, and it did not reach a large amount of people, because most people said that this is some thing which is not really legit. But today fake news has become more prominent than even actual news, and by margin of numbers. So the way most social media sites work is that it is run by an algorithm which basically feeds you content which you previously like or susceptible to like. So in a way, if you're a person who has clicked on a fake news article and read a fake news article and liked it on Facebook, so it is going to show you the same more article that is filled with fake news. And this does not stop there. So the way it works is that once you are in that thing, so it is going to recommend you the articles which is filled with fake news, hate speech, and many other things. And another thing is that, so that algorithm basically forces you to enter into an echo chamber of fake news, and so you won't believe the actual news and say that it is all a lie. And that is a real problem today, in terms of how elections are fought. Another thing is that there are bots on social media. Bots are basically AIs which their goal is to promote jargon, promote fake news and whatnot. And another thing, as you already mentioned, are deepfakes. So by deepfakes, you can basically put anybody's face on anybody and make them say anything, such as the case of Obama saying some things and making Stalin sing some song. But that is the thing. It can be used for memes also, but it can also have more ethical concerns, because in a way, a large amount of people today are getting affected by social media and how basically it treats fake news, and how these algorithms are programmed to make you see what you like, but that may not be necessarily what is right for you. And that is why we see such conspiracy theories and people who are becoming indulged in those conspiracy theories more and more today.
How about, I mean, what are the, how realistic are these possibilities that, they can be used for surveillance of the people?
So the possibilities of that happening are not only realistic, it is happening today. So if we think about it, like we only think about it that it is only the big corporations that are collecting the data, but somebody, the sovereign has the utmost power in a nation, right? So like I'd like to give you the example of China is an authoritarian state, and every company there has to bend to the will of the party. And what is happening is China, as China, many cities in China have basically become surveillance cities. Like for example, Shenzhen, which is right next to mostly trouble-ridden Hong Kong. It is a technological marvel, a metropolis, and its transformation has been magnificent in how China transformed itself. It tells a story, but it has also become a surveillance state today, where the government tracks everybody what they're doing, and basically it is leading to a credit system where based on your actions you will be tracked and you will be surveillance every time. That means you have no privacy, and you have no freedom of speech and whatever, which is also not true today. But the effects of those will become more severe, because when government is able to track you 24 into 7, what happens to people who are rational? And that is a worry. So like the quote from the book, Big Brother is always watching you, and AI may make that thing come true.
But Do you think people are not aware there, or is it just because they are told about this convenience and how easy it is? Because I know many of my friends, then they will say that if you log in at one place or two place with one master password, then you don't have to do it again and again. So could it be that people choose convenience over security and thus losing their control over it?
Yes, sir, absolutely. People choose convenience over their security. Like a lot of people save their passwords on Google, which
Hmm.
knows them, of course. Another thing is that the if you talk about countries like China, the China is basically today powered by super apps. So what are super apps? Apps are apps in which you don't have to leave the app to do anything. Like you can fill your taxes, you can order food, you can buy clothes, you can chat your friend, and so that super app is controlled by only one company. And as I already mentioned that company is bent to will of the government in China. So WeChat is a super app owned by Tencent. So Tencent basically gives this data to the Chinese government, which in turn tracks you, and that is becoming a reality in China today. People A lot of people are not aware of it. Some people choose to ignore it. Some people who are aware of it, but what can they do in an authoritarian state? You can do nothing about it.
In the context of privacy, I was just it just struck to me. Are there any biases in artificial intelligence?
Of course, there are biases in artificial intelligence. So, artificial intelligence is first of all made by humans. And as humans, we are biased creatures. So, sometimes what happens is that that bias may come into artificial intelligence algorithms, and artificial intelligence algorithm may increase that bias and carry it forward. So, and another bias in AI is by data collection. That means that AI learns from the data. What happens when the data itself is incomplete? To give you an example of both, in a way, artificial intelligence are biased have been seen to be biased against people of color, people from different gender. That means it is biased against those people. So let's say a company is hiring people based on an algorithm, and that algorithm is biased against people of color and people from different genders such as women or people from LGBT plus community. So it will not basically, even if they are qualified for the job, it will not hire them, and in a way that is sabotaging your that is not equal uh, the way they are hiring people based on that algorithm. So in a way bias does exist in AI. Most people think that AI is not biased, but that is not really true.
So basically, what you do is like you factor in right in the programming. So it sounds like very objective, but you have already filtered out a couple of elements or variables, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I mean, listening to you, it sounds kind of like it's a big problematic thing. And of course, as a citizen, it is a matter of concern. I'm just thinking about the policymakers. It must be a really big challenge or headache for them. How do they, handle this? What are the areas where they have to make, kind of conscious or judicious decisions about AI and its application?
What the lawmakers have to do is make legislations around privacy. And if we ignore the authoritarian states for now, even in most democratic society, that is not true, because there are not really laws against data collection and many other things. Because like we think that AI has been around forever. We think, but the main type of AI that is being used today, the notion of it is only 15 years or 10 years old, and it is really new. And the way democracies react to new things is really slow. So in a way, it also uh, shows the major fault line of democracies around the world. Yes, some legislations are made, such as the GDPR law, which was passed by the European Union. So in that you have, so to give you an example what it is, so every time you visit a site, you get a cookie warning. So cookies are basically identifiers on the internet which identifies you. So most people actually, so the way the law was is that basically it has forced every site to give you a cookie warning, but most people just choose all cookies and accept it. That means you're giving away your data. Another thing is that in terms of what you think about AI in future is going to create massive amounts of employment. A large amount of people are going to be threatened out of their jobs, thrown out of their jobs because of AI and related things such as robots. And what happens to those people? Because those people will not sit silent, and something has to happen. People are giving some solutions such as universal basic income, but those solutions have to be implemented by the policymakers around the world. Governments have to think about it, and right now as things are, governments are very slow to react on those things. Another thing is that AI can lead to a new generation of autonomous weapons. So right now we are entering into the era of cyber warfare. And what is happening is that, to give you an example, most air forces in the world today have drones, but those drones are basically controlled by a remote pilot who is sitting somewhere. But what if that drone has AI and that AI is able to fight? So in terms of autonomous weapons, what could this lead to is basically countries fighting wars all the time, and how many resources it is going to take. It is going to consume these wars, which are ultimately meaningless. And another thing, why would a country basically go to war against when it can basically hack into your systems and basically turn off the power grids of the entire country? That is the main thing. It can become also annoying, and it can also be very useful for terrorist organizations who want to attack certain things, because the barrier of entry, as I said, in AI is very less, and it can lead to massive consequences going forward. And lawmakers have to think about it, what the whole thing with AI is going to do in future.
It sounds kind of a pretty scary story, the way you are portraying it. But the details, yeah, I understand because unfortunately, not many are concerned about it. So, what are the biggest issues that you think that's where we see this transaction of AI and the challenges? Something like inequality.
I will not say that AI is the biggest problem the world is facing today. That is obviously climate change. But AI is another problem that can either enhance the way the climate change is happening or can decrease it. Another thing is that the world is facing a crisis, the crisis of inequality today. That means the rich are becoming more richer, the poor are getting more poorer. And AI, in a way, can contribute it, because AI is basically controlled by these massive corporations, which basically are profit driven, and they do not contribute anything to the society. Some of them don't even pay taxes. So in a way, AI is like it is today. It is becoming more of the policy of rich takes all rather than divided equally across the spectrum of society. Another thing is that climate change. So in a way, AI can help fight climate change. How it will do that is basically companies, governments can basically identify the data patterns which cannot be done by human via AI, which can help us basically uh, materialize the fight against climate change on a more smaller scale than possible before. But another thing is that AI can also contribute towards it, because you to run AI you need a lot of resources, mainly electricity. And how are you going to get the electricity? Is because the most the way electricity is produced in most countries today is by fossil fuels, which can contribute to it. Another thing is that we need to know that the algorithms do not actually run in on clouds. In a way, the cloud computing is said, they run on semiconductors, and semiconductors in on itself are very scarce resource in the world today. And way semiconductors are, that things which are required to produce semiconductors, the way they are mined, there are also ethical concerns there.
I see. So, what is the? I mean, for many of us don't really understand very well this cloud computing and then using the semiconductors. What is the difference? Can you just briefly elaborate on it?
So cloud computing is a term. It is nothing but the computing which is done in the cloud. So it is not an actual cloud. The computing is actually done in a server far away from you, such as when you upload any file, let's say a song, to YouTube. So what it is doing is that it is taking the file to a YouTube server where the file is stored. So that is the cloud. The semiconductor is basically the chips which power everything today, from your microwave to your smart fridge to your laptop. phone, those chips are semiconductors. They are made from semiconductors, and those semiconductors are basically, in a way, made by certain companies which basically exist in a way that if one of them goes down, all of them goes down, the entire industry may not be able to function. And that is also a area of concern for everybody.
So is it what you're saying is this the industry or the company that is manufacturing semiconductors like concentrated in just one type of countries or limited countries or in the hands of limited companies? Is it the reason?
High-end semiconductor manufacturing happens today is basically it is done by only one, two, or three companies, and those are basically
Hmm.
TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which has most of its foundries. Foundries are factories which manufacture those chips in Taiwan, and Taiwan, we all know, is an area where geopolitics is very messy and not really a good place to be in future, because China, the way China is reacting to it. Another
Hmm.
company is Intel. Intel has been left behind in that space for now, but Intel is an American company. Another company is Samsung, which is a Korean company. And
Hmm.
in another company which basically designs the semiconductor but does not manufacture it is AMD. Another is that ARM is based in UK, and it is being right now in a acquisition deal by Nvidia, which based in US. If you think about semiconductors, the entire industry of semiconductors, the research that happens in them is basically happens in two or three countries around the world, and those are developed countries such as US, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, and in some ways China. But China is very behind in the technology, and the barrier of entry into semiconductors is very high for anybody to go in. It is an industry where the winner takes all is a reality. For example, the way we think about it, semiconductors, let's say you have a processor and a company develops a processor node, so that company will get the way OEM works is that you have to compete with they compete with each other, but at the end the company which is manufacturing the original chip is only one, so it is winner takes all. Another thing is that semiconductors, the volume of semiconductors that can be manufactured in a year is very limited, and the to set up foundries which actually manufacture those chips are very expensive. Like a modern day foundry which is going to manufacture the cutting edge chips today can cost between 10 to 20 billion dollars, and that is not less amounts of cash for anybody, not even for the governments. That is why it is a contested zone and very interesting space today.
Because these days also, I mean, we are struggling with the pandemic, COVID-19, and then some people are also connecting it with the climate change problems. Do you think AI has some constructive role to play in this case?
Yes, AI definitely has a role to play in this case, because uh, today the climate change is the problem of climate change is basically the biggest problem that humanity has ever faced and will face, I think, for now, because in a way it threatens our own existence, and not only our existence but along with us existence of many species. But the thing is that a lot of people do not really recognize that climate change is a thing. And these include many notable people, many people such as presidents of the country. And they do not even recognize that climate change exists. And the same problem is happening with AI. People don't even recognize that AI is a problem. Another thing is that AI can help us in many ways fight climate change, even though I might have sound a little gloomy, but I think the future is really hopeful in terms of AI, because it can really help humanity become more successful. Like every technology has, we just need to use it in a way that it helps us, not that it basically makes us go extinct. So in terms of climate change, AI can help us basically run information campaigns, make more people informed about it, so they can pressure the lawmakers, the policymakers to take action about it. Another thing is that, as I mentioned, AI can help us recognize the data patterns so that we can fight the climate change better. It can also in future lead us to technologies which can help us fight the climate change. But the first step is to know about it. First step is to learn about it. And most people, a lot of people don't really want to do that.
Hmm. I'm just, thinking that this is something, especially for the young generation, unless, as you just said, that people need to know about it. Once you know, then only you can develop this understanding whether this is good or bad. You can't really criticize or offer any critical assessment or appreciation until unless you know it. So, in your understanding, when you look around, when you interact with people, with your friends, family, and all these, your network, how concerned do you think the young generation or youth is at the moment as far as AI is concerned, or its issues both? I mean, I'm not saying only negative side, but also the positive side. How aware they are?
Sir, I think that people are unaware. Even from my generation, people are very unaware about AI and its implications. To just give you an example, so Facebook every month for a longest time, Facebook has numerous data leaks. And most people don't know about it. People who know about it don't even care about it. Another thing is that most people use the same password, which is not a thing we should do when you are concerned about privacy. Another thing is that the way people think about AI is that it is some abstract concept which does not really influence us. But in a way, your YouTube feed, your Twitter feed, your Facebook feed, even videos you see on TikTok and Instagram Reels, they influence your brain and they makes you think a certain way. And most people are unaware that this is happening to them. It is shaping how they think unconsciously. And it is a really concerning issue today that people are really unaware about the way their smartphones in their hand is influencing them. What they are turning into.
Yeah. Now, with this, I mean, I think this is an obvious question. Since you are reading, you have been reading a lot about all these things. What difference do you see in your understanding and your analysis since you have gotten interested in these kind of matters? How has it changed your way of thinking? What would you say?
So first thing is that I have become more aware of the dangers posed by my Twitter feed and my Instagram feed, even so much so that I care about a lot more. I care a lot more about my privacy now that I'm trying to become more aware about how to indulge in more privacy methods which can basically do not sabotage my privacy. I have become more aware about how these massive corporations around the world are basically playing with human minds, how they are influencing us, and even the lawmakers in some cases, how even the smallest of things which you do not really think about, how Facebook or Twitter can affect you, how AI is going to affect you into the future. But in a way, I have also become aware about how when it's new is really treated in a way. So when we talk about when first the steam engine was basically introduced, people, I think when first cotton mills were mechanical cotton mills were introduced, people protested and process saying that this will basically lead to job losses and whatnot. And I have understood that in a way, technology, some people may not understand it, and that is a bad thing because we need to understand what the technology is going to do to us. Because once, if you don't understand it, you cannot act on it, and if you cannot act on it, then you might as well be not a human being, because that is the greatest strength we have.
Yes, that's true. Now, all those who are listening to you at the moment, if they are interested in learning about it more, or probably go deeper about it, what are the sources that you would suggest they should consult to develop better understanding about AI and its applications and its impact on their lives?
Yes, sir. So I would recommend two books. First is simply named AI Ethics by Michael Kofiber. Another is AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee. I would recommend a podcast by the Oxford University called Ethics in AI. And I would also recommend you to first go check out the Ethics of AI page on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Ujjwal, it's great learning so many new things. I think, I mean, I have so many questions. I can go on for forever, but given our the time constraints of this episode, I think we are approaching the end of it. But certainly, I mean, given this interest in the field, and if there is another opportunity, and whenever you have some time, I would like to continue in another episode where we can explore some other facets of AI and its connection with this time ethics, like with international relations, international politics, because I think that is also very important. And as you just mentioned, that most governments, they also don't take it either seriously or deny that the issues like climate change or negative impact of AI. So we will do that. What is that the last message about this AI you would like to give to our listeners?
The last thing I would like to say is that learn about how the things which you interact with works behind the scenes. Learn about how AI is basically influencing you, and that is all.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this was Ujjwal Deshmukh. He's honors student in political science, and he was sharing his thoughts on ethics in AI. And I hope that I have learned a lot. There are many things which I did not know it. So I would like to thank you, Ujjwal, for taking time and letting us know all these things. And yeah, I look forward to some other sessions whenever it becomes possible for us. So thank you very much, huh?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. See you.